In a chilling case that shocked the community, Wade Stephen Wilson was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of 2 women in Cape Coral, Florida. The sentencing, delivered by Judge Nicholas Thompson, marked the culmination of a harrowing criminal trial that exposed the depths of Wilson's depravity and violence. The case began in September 2019, when Wilson embarked on a terrifying crime spree that left 2 innocent women dead and a community in fear. The first victim was Christine Melton, whom Wilson attacked in her own home with premeditated intent. He savagely beat and strangled Melton before stealing her vehicle, showing a callous disregard for human life. But Wilson's rampage was far from over. After murdering Melton, he drove to meet his girlfriend, Melissa Montez. When Montez refused to get into the stolen car with him, Wilson's violent tendencies surfaced again. He battered Montez in broad daylight, demonstrating his willingness to use violence against even those close to him. Fortunately, Montez managed to escape, fleeing from Wilson's brutal assault. Undeterred by this encounter and seemingly driven by an insatiable urge to kill, Wilson then made the chilling decision to murder another person. His next victim was Diane Ruiz, an innocent woman simply walking to work. Wilson approached Ruiz under the guise of asking for directions. When she got into his car to assist him, he began strangling her as she tried to exit the vehicle. What followed was a horrific ordeal for Ruiz. Wilson drove to an empty lot, strangling her into unconsciousness at least one additional time during the journey when she attempted to flee. Upon reaching the lot, Ruiz made another desperate attempt to escape. In response, Wilson committed the unthinkable. He drove over her at least once, inflicting mortal injuries to her spine, ribs, and neck. The level of cruelty and disregard for human suffering was truly staggering. The brutality of these crimes shocked even seasoned law enforcement officials. The evidence presented at trial painted a picture of a man consumed by violence, willing to inflict unimaginable pain and suffering on his victims. Both murders were deemed by the court to be heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The second murder of Diane Ruiz was further classified as cold, calculated, and premeditated, a chilling indication of Wilson's state of mind as he carried out these horrendous acts. What made the case even more disturbing was that Wilson committed these murders while on probation, prior felony convictions. This demonstrated a complete disregard for the justice system and any attempts at rehabilitation. In addition to the 2 first-degree murders, Wilson was also charged with grand theft of a motor vehicle, battery, and burglary of a dwelling, a litany of serious offenses that spoke to his danger to society. The trial process was thorough, with the court carefully considering all testimony, evidence, and arguments presented by both the prosecution and defense. Judge Thompson emphasized the unique nature of the death penalty, noting that its application is reserved only for cases with the most aggravating and least mitigating circumstance. The judge's sentencing order reflected a meticulous evaluation of all factors involved in the case. In weighing the aggravating and mitigating factors, the court did not simply engage in a counting procedure. Instead, Judge Thompson made a reasoned judgment based on the totality of the circumstance. This approach reflected the gravity of the decision at hand and the care with which the justice system approaches capital punishment. Aggravating factors in Wilson's case were numerous and severe. Beyond the heinous nature of the crimes themselves, the court considered the fact that Wilson committed multiple first-degree murders in close succession. Theft of Melton's vehicle and the battery of Montez further demonstrated Wilson's disregard for the law and the rights of others. His probation status at the time of the murders was another significant aggravating factor, indicating a failure to reform despite previous opportunities. In terms of mitigating circumstances, the court found no statutory mitigating factor. However, it did consider several non-statutory mitigating circumstances presented by the defense. Out of 13 enumerated non-statutory mitigating factors, the court found that 10 had been established, though 6 of these were given little weight. The mitigating circumstances that were established painted a complex picture of Wilson's background. The court recognized that Wilson had suffered from drug use from a young age and had undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues. He had felt abandoned by his biological parents, factor that likely contributed to his psychological state. However, it was noted that Wilson had been raised by a devoted adopted family in a supportive and loving environment, somewhat counterbalancing the negative aspects of his early life. The court also considered Wilson's behavior following the crimes. It was noted that he did not resist law enforcement when arrested and fully confessed to both murders. While this did not excuse his actions, it was factored into the overall assessment of character and the case circumstance. The jury's recommendation played a significant role in the sentencing decision. For the murder of Christine Melton, the jury recommended the death penalty by a vote of 9-3. For the murder of Diane Ruiz, the recommendation was even stronger, with a 10-2 vote in favor of the death penalty. Judge Thompson gave great weight to these advisory verdicts, recognizing the jury's careful consideration of the evidence and circumstances. In his final analysis, Judge Thompson concluded that the aggravating factors greatly outweighed the mitigating circumstance. He found that nothing in Wilson's background or mental state suggested that a death sentence would be inappropriate given the facts of the case. A review of other reported capital cases led the court to conclude that the death penalty was not disproportionate in this instance. Consequently, Wade Stephen Wilson was sentenced to death for each count of first-degree murder. For the additional charges, he received concurrent sentences: 5 years imprisonment for grand theft of a motor vehicle, 364 days in Lee County Jail for battery, 15 years imprisonment for burglary of a dwelling, and 364 days in Lee County Jail for petty theft. The sentencing also included additional provision. Wilson was ordered to have no contact with any of the victim's family members, a measure intended to provide some peace and protection to those who had already suffered immensely due to his action. The court imposed $7,500 in prosecution costs, to which the defense raised no objection. As is standard in capital cases, Wilson was notified that his convictions and sentences would be subject to automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. The judge assured that if Wilson could not afford an attorney for this appeal process, one would be appointed for him, ensuring his constitutional rights would be protected, even as he faced the most severe punishment allowed by law. The case of Wade Stephen Wilson serves as a stark reminder of the darkest aspects of human nature and the heavy responsibility of the justice system in dealing with such extreme cases, violence and cruelty. The meticulous process of weighing aggravating and mitigating factors, the careful consideration of jury recommendations, and the thorough review of case law all underscore the gravity with which the court approached this sentencing decision. The impact of Wilson's crimes extends far beyond the courtroom. 2 innocent lives were brutally cut short, leaving families and a community grapple with immeasurable loss and trauma. The random nature of the attacks, particularly in the case of Diane Ruiz, instilled a sense of fear and vulnerability in the Cape Coral community. This case also reignites ongoing debates about the death penalty and its place in the modern justice system. Opponents might argue that crimes of this magnitude, characterized by such extreme cruelty and disregard for human life, justify capital punishment. Critics, however, might question whether even such heinous acts warrant state-sanctioned execution, raising concerns about the fallibility of the justice system and the ethical implications of the death penalty. Regardless of one's stance on capital punishment, the case of Wade Stephen Wilson stands as a somber reminder of the capacity for human cruelty and the enduring challenge of administering justice in the face of such extreme crimes. It underscores the heavy burden placed on judges, juries, and the entire legal system when confronted with cases that test the very limits of our societal norms and legal frameworks. As Wilson awaits the automatic appeal process, the families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz are left to navigate a world forever altered by his actions. Their loss serves as a painful reminder of the far-reaching consequences of violent crime and the enduring trauma inflicted on victims' loved ones. In conclusion, the case of Wade Stephen Wilson represents a tragic chapter in Florida's criminal history. It is a stark illustration of the extremes of human behavior and the weighty responsibility of the justice system in responding to such acts. As society continues to grapple with questions of crime, punishment, and rehabilitation, cases like this serve as powerful reminders of the complex challenges facing our legal and moral frameworks in the pursuit of justice.